listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.
So, hi everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Changing Reality. Welcome one, welcome all. For all of our returning members of the audience, we appreciate each and every single one of you joining us here today. And to all of our new members of the audience, welcome. And where have you been all this time? Don't you know that this is the place to be? Here is where we uncover some of the best stories, both from campus and from all around the world, interviewing alumni, individuals, professors, students who have had fascinating journeys as we discover how they managed to, for lack of better words, change the reality around us. And this is a show that, I am personally very passionate about because I believe that by speaking to these phenomenal people from all walks of life, we'll be able to have a little glimpse into the future and, into the experiences that we need to start charting our own courses and hopefully shortening our learning curves around the way. Through this show, we'll be hanging out and interviewing individuals from social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, industry leaders, to even artists, musicians, and inspiring individuals globally. And by hearing their stories, as I said, we get an insight into not just their industries, but their mindset and their thoughts as they went through these experiences that shaped who they are. And I don't think any of you need reminding how powerful the power of stories can be. But it's been a shaping force in my life. It's been something that has been so powerful in the things that I've done. And it's really given me the opportunity to look at the world from a different lens. So I hope that this show similarly gives you that opportunity. For all of you who are new, my name is Harsha, and I am the DJ from WKHS Radio who's in charge of the show. I am excited to take you through this journey with me just because, as I say, I'm an advocate in this whole journey of stories. Personally, a little bit about me, other than being a junior here at the University of Pennsylvania, I actually founded and run a youth movement called Ascendance, which is a social enterprise that today works with over 26 countries and 50,000 students globally to help create experiential learning opportunities for at-risk students to become social entrepreneurs. We work with students from all across the globe to be able to help them figure out what it is they love doing, go out there and get hands-on experiences, hands-on projects, experiential learning opportunities, and eventually incubate their own social enterprises, their own careers. And in the last year alone, we incubated 40 student-run social entrepreneurs, and at the same time, help students as young as 13 years old to 17 be able to live their dreams, run their own projects, start their own businesses, all through the power of stories. All because of kind individuals who've taken their time out of their busy schedules to be able to share with us what worked for them, what didn't, and what we can be doing better as we have our shot. So similarly, as I said, I hope this is the same platform for you. If there are any industries that you want to learn about, or if there are any particular experiences that you are going through that you want to see if anyone else went through, please reach out to us. You have our contacts, you have the comments, and we'd be more than happy to talk about what we can be doing a little bit differently to feature experiences that would be the most meaningful to you and your current circumstances. So with that, we have an amazing speaker with us today. She's someone who, when I first read about, was completely blown away and has had a fascinating journey across continents, across various roles, industries, and someone that I personally am inspired by. She is a career woman who has had her life all the way from Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia to halfway across the world in Cape Town. She has studied and worked on 4 continents and is somebody who has had experiences from, the collegial atmosphere, strategic consulting. She has worked for some of the biggest brands out there, from, the university itself to organizations such as the United Nations Foundation, Sweetgreens, BNP Paribas, and so many others. And is someone who, I'm excited to chat with about both her career journey, but also her personal journey of how she managed to balance all of that while still being an advocate in her community for areas that she's passionate about, and for being somebody who is so committed to her family and the rest of her life as well. So without further ado, let's welcome Hannah, our amazing speaker, onto our virtual stage. So hi, Hannah, how are you doing today?
Doing wonderful, Harsha. How are you?
Very excited to chat. As I said, I have the best showtime because it always kind of is towards the end of the week. So it's always the reflective, relaxed time for people to get their thinking hats on. But hopefully you've been having a good start to, at the end of the day. You're in the West Coast, am I right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just about an hour north of LA. I am a military spouse. My husband flies for the U.S. Navy, so we are stationed at Point Mugu, which is just north of Malibu, and we're having a beautiful Friday sunset over here. And I have to say, I'm so delighted to be spending some time with you this evening, Harsha, because this is a resource that I wish that I had when I was on campus to see the different alumni profiles and sort of the art of the possible when it comes to taking your Penn degree, taking your liberal arts degree, or from whichever school that you're coming from, and following your passions, having different experiences, because we all know that there are very clear paths from Penn, and then there are very sort of non-circuitous and windy paths from Penn that are equally fulfilling. So it's great to spend some time with you.
No, I appreciate that. And, I think looking at the common thread between all, your different roles, your different industries, I think you're someone who truly makes an impact wherever you go, whether it's directly for working for some of the largest impact driven organizations or in a chief of staff role, or even, just through your kind of energy and your way of looking at things. So I'm very interested to, dive deep in. I think you have a career and a way of, bringing out experiences and bringing out change within organizations that many people wish that they have. I know, at least I speak for my friends at Penn, where they wish they could have as much impact as you have had. So I guess the question to start off is, was this all part of some grand plan? You started off since kindergarten, you were like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change the world, everything's going to be perfect. Or were you ever as lost and confused as us when you were doing your undergrad and making those decisions of where you thought your life would head?
It's a great question. I'm glad we're starting off with something like this because I've always seen business and career as fully intertwined with life, and it's not something that can be easily extracted. And I've always looked at my education and my career as something that should be fulfilling, just as my hobbies are, just as my family is, just as my relationships are. So glad we're starting with this. I do have to note, if I'm out of breath at any portion of this segment, I am 9 months pregnant, so I have about 40% lung capacity than I typically have.
You're breathing for two. Congrats, also.
Thank you. So, potentially future Quaker, we shall see where she charts her path, but very, very excited to be doing this with at least one very young one in the audience here. So as far as, how I thought about my career, I wish I could say that it was all intentional and all very charted out. And, it's really not the case. I'd say I've always followed my curiosity, and that is the best sort of alternative to a 5-year plan I think you can ever have. I always sort of look for the thing that is a little bit curious and is a little bit scary to me. Even choosing to enroll at Penn, I was intimidated. I was, choosing between schools that might be a little bit more in my comfort zone versus an urban university that had, all of the different topics and courses that could be studied under the sun. And I knew that would be outside of my comfort zone. And I never looked back once I took sort of that scarier choice. And it was the greatest privilege of my life, honestly, to be at Penn and to explore intellectually as much as I did. But my parents always, sort of joked that I squeezed every drop out of Penn that I possibly could as far as experiences. I took, my senior spring, when a lot of people tend to be backing off a little bit, I took a full course load, 6 courses. I was working 2 different work study jobs at Career Services and at the Fells Institute of Government. I was waitressing downtown at the Dandelion, just off of Rittenhouse Square, and tried to keep a full, fun social life as well. So I'd say, I've always been someone that approaches life with a lot of vigor and a lot of passion. And the through line has always been, what am I curious about, and what is something that's going to challenge me?
No, I think that's an amazing note to start on, just because even like, we're at the beginning of the semester now. And I feel like one of the things that I keep hearing is, especially from freshmen, is it can be very overwhelming that I don't know what to choose and I don't know what to do. And many times people do things because, not necessarily they're curious about it, but because, that's where the hype is, that's where the interest is, in a sense, that they can find it a little hard to steer into the direction of, the path that they want to see for themselves, or the things that they're interested in learning about. You had a wide range of things that you explored. And tell me a little bit about, some of those experiences that you had. I think we have some photos. And, they're not always the most like conventional things when you think about Penn. So this is actually the Penn Symposium for China, in a sense. And you were part of this team that I think organized and led it. So tell me a little bit about this experience. How did you even end up here? And like, what was the story behind it?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I sort of always tried to tune into what was piquing my curiosity. And some of those courses were, with Dr. Adrienne Rain taking biosocial criminology and looking at MRIs of criminals and sort of the patterns of their anatomy and what led them to these crimes. And then another sort of niche topic that I was so curious about and so passionate about was Chinese foreign policy, and looking at, increasingly of importance today, the Taiwan Strait, and looking at, the Nine Dash Line and the historical land claims that China has to that region. So it was something that was always very fascinating to me, and I was able to take some senior courses at that level. And at an extracurricular level, I helped produce the Penn Symposium on Contemporary China, and we were able to bring in folks from all different parts of the discussion, from corporate to government, and highlighted some really interesting topics. So that was one highlight of my undergrad experience. I also really appreciated the Philly restaurant scene. I mentioned I worked at the Dandelion. I loved Dim Sum Garden. I still go there whenever I get to Philly. That was a frequent Friday night stop, just to get some wonderful dumplings and enjoy some company of good friends. I also worked at Career Services, and that really, kind of speaks to my appreciation for this platform that you've given your peers, to see the stories of alumni that might not have, gone straight into the career paths that we hear so much about from Wharton, from engineering, which are, again, wonderful, very inspiring career paths. But, there are sort of the alternative things that you can do with a liberal arts education, and, spanning all different industries. So I'm happy to be part of that.
No, absolutely. And I think you're a testament to, how much impact a liberal arts education can bring. I know you also had, your master's in nonprofit leadership by the time, you left Penn. And, I guess my question is, you've seen a lot of people from your career services point of view. And I'm sure at the same time, you're also concurrently seeing a lot of friends go through that kind of experience of figuring out what was right for them while you were figuring this out for yourself. So I guess, the question is, what was the thing that, number one, that you think is a solid piece of advice that you got or you lived by that helped you make those decisions of what next after Penn? And number two, what was the most surprising thing that you couldn't plan for when you actually ended up in your next career and your next step?
Sure. So I think the most important thing, and this is definitely an important topic on campuses across the country, is while you're stretching yourself and growing yourself and expanding your horizons, also taking really good care of yourself and your mental well-being, and tapping into the best ways that you can be a good person and be kind to the people around you, and not just be sort of climbing that ladder. So that was something that I always strove to keep at the forefront. I remember walking to Patrick Gym one time. I said, to my mom on the phone, I don't know if I can study another minute for this final. I'm going to go work out instead. And just prioritizing well-being, and knowing that at the end of the day, your health, your family's health, like that is paramount, and keeping that perspective. So I'd say that's something that I entered my career with, and it's something that has proven to be so important time and time again. All of this is for nothing if we're not happy, if we're not fulfilled, if we're not taken care of. So that's sort of my overall frame. And it's easy to get lost in the ambition and the drive that so many outlets on campus push us towards. But as far as how I launched my career, so as you mentioned, I did start off by doing a master's in nonprofit leadership. I submatriculated into the program. I encourage anyone who is an undergrad now, if you happen to have courses that are in a certain area, mine happened to be in social impact, they could add up to a master's degree, and you could be like 3/4 of the way there without even trying. So that is something that was a happy accident that sort of came to be. I took a couple additional courses, and all of a sudden I had a master's degree. So I finished the coursework, and in May 2016, graduated with my bachelor's and my master's, and just had this practicum to do. So I chose, on a map, I said I'd always wanted to live in South Africa and experience a social impact ecosystem outside of the US. So in the US, we have 501c3s or nonprofits, which is very tied to our tax code, and something called non-redistribution, which basically means any profits that the nonprofit makes, it cannot redistribute to shareholders. It has to put back into the mission. So I always was sort of thoughtful about, what does this look like in other countries? Do they have for-profit companies that are also mission driven? So I looked at an impact fund called Impact Amplifier that is based in Cape Town. And I said, that would be a really interesting place to spend a few months and do my practicum. So this is one very big lesson that I learned early on, which is it never hurts to ask. Ask for what you want. No one, is as thoughtful or, cares as much about your career and your experiences as you do. So be a little selfish and ask sometimes. And I asked, could I do my practicum not in Philly per se, not in DC, in a US nonprofit? Can I go abroad and do it there? And there was funding. There was an alum that was very generously able to help make that a reality. And I think I had a richer experience for myself and for the university because of it. So the photo you just shared was from my office in Cape Town. I spent about 4 months working with some wonderful people on different projects across Southern Africa, everything from rural electrification and powering up literally townships outside of Cape Town and all across the Western Cape to, clean water projects to we had an agritech project that was working on farmers, smallholder farmers reporting crop yields so that they could participate in bigger supply chains. So it was really a fascinating experience. It was a great way to sort of soften the landing after leaving such a wonderful, vibrant campus experience. But that was kind of where I got my start. And I went back to DC after finishing up that practicum. And I really thought about, what's missing from my academic background. And it really was quantitative studies. I hadn't spent much time. I took the bare minimum math class, I think math 104, or sorry, math 140 to meet the requirement at Penn. And I sort of steered clear other than that. But I realized to be successful in business and to really get to the places I wanted to go, I needed to sharpen up my quant. So I interviewed, I knew I wanted to get to New York, and I took a job at a French investment bank called BNP Paribas and spent almost 3 years there and had a really fantastic experience working on the strategy consulting team. So, not pure quant sales and trading, but it was a good overview of the different financial products that the bank had. It was a good overview into the different functions of a corporation. If I have any advice for an undergrad that is looking at, post-university opportunities, a generalist experience as your first stop will only serve you well. Learning how to conduct yourself in meetings, learning how to write emails, learning how to slide and work with Excel, It sounds very dry, and at times it very much is, but it will serve you well no matter where you go from there. And I was really appreciative of those years that I spent in the office, learning those hard and soft skills. So that is a true recommendation of mine. Follow your curiosity, but also land at a place that can teach you some skills that might not be something that you picked up as an undergrad.
No, I absolutely think that's solid advice. I'm not gonna lie. The first time I had to draft an email, I realized, I don't think I've ever used email in in this capacity needed, or when I started really figuring out what Excel really meant beyond just drawing up like invitations and stuff like that. So appreciate that important kind of piece of advice. One of the things that I'm very curious is you've had a lot of this kind of diverse experiences. Penn is itself a diverse experience in a whole, if you do it right, and you obviously did. And then you go halfway across the world, you see social impact through a completely different lens, and then now you go back to the rest of the world in a sense, and you take on a new industry. I guess my question is, at least in my experience, I've seen sometimes the experiences that we have can be vastly different, and they can be a little tough to reconcile, the work styles, or the problems and so on. Like I joke that half the issues that I see on the ground in social impact in Southeast Asia never even get talked about when you go for like actual companies, and they're discussing that I want to solve this and that and this, but without actually even being able to identify what's happening on the ground. You were in a unique position where you had all of these different experiences probably in your brain, digesting and being able to bring in a very educated perspective to all of the conversations you're in. How did you make sure that your voice was heard, that your perspective was heard when you were in these various roles? So whether you were in Cape Town, got some beautiful pictures there working with the team there, or whether you were in BNP and you were being among your fellow amazing women and amazing individuals at the finance sector as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the soft skills I was speaking to, as far as learning how to lead a meeting, learning how to give a presentation, learning how to speak to executives that, their existing frame of reference for you is that you're fresh out of school. What do you know? How are you going to give me advice about my business? And I'd say keeping an element of humility. Every time that I entered a room with someone that was more tenured, senior, whatever it may be, I tried to, just keep a curious mindset and learn as much as I could from their styles and their delivery, but also, keeping this mindset, as you are learning from other people's soft skills, keeping this mindset of reciprocity. So one thing that I'm a career coach on the side, and I love helping early to mid career professionals make their pivots. We can talk a little bit more about that at the end if you'd like. But one thing that I always tell people is that, when you're early in your career, you don't necessarily think you have a lot to offer the world, and you feel at sometimes as though you are sort of a sponge. You're taking from other people, and you're taking advice, you're taking mentorship, you're taking all of these things from folks that are more senior to you. But my challenge to people is that there's always something that you can do from a reciprocal standpoint. So if I have a wonderful networking call with someone that is an executive at X, Fortune 100 company, I'm going to say, I so appreciate your time. What is something that I can do for you? Whether it's, sharing this campaign that you're running on LinkedIn. Can I help to be another set of eyes if you're copy editing this new book that you're putting out? Can I promote this initiative amongst my peers in my alumni network? There's always something, especially as a Penn alum, that you can look to not so much in a you scratch my back, I scratch yours, or a quid pro quo, but it's something that I think you should always keep in mind, that these people are giving a lot of their time and energy to develop you. And you should in turn have this very humble, sort of appreciative stance where you do as much as you can to help them out as well. So I'd say, to your question about developing your soft skills, finding mentorship, that is one of my key tips, is just to stay humble, learn from others' style, but also try to give back where you can.
No, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I will say one of sort of the skills that I didn't realize I had, but others saw in me before I saw it was public speaking and presenting. Of course, that's the word that I trip up on a little bit. But when I was at BNP, it was made clear to me that I was being asked, time after time to present and to share our findings or our presentation with executives. And I had the opportunity to represent the bank at the Forbes Under 30 summit in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. And the picture that I think you have pulled up, yep. So that was one of the scariest moments of my young life, presenting to investors from Silicon Valley and from Jerusalem Venture Partners, presenting this pitch for a cybersecurity company. And it was sort of this hackathon model, like pitch competition. And my team, who was standing behind me, had asked me to give the presentation, and I was terrified out of my mind. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I'm sure a lot of us at Penn had days like that where we felt like there had to be some mistake. How did I get admitted here? What is the reason? But it just was a very fulfilling moment in that I didn't see it in myself, but others, had nominated me to take this on. So, beyond listening to your curiosity and things that scare you a little bit, also look for things that others see in you. And it might be something that, lines up. They see it as a skill that you have, and it's also something that is very fulfilling to you. So always keep your ears and the antennas kind of perked for things like that.
No, I think that's very solid advice. Both of those of, number one, being willing to give, being willing to kind of, help where you may not have been asked in the first place, but to put yourself out there and ask. And then the second thing that you mentioned of, being cognizant of what people are pointing out, and like it may not be the skill that you thought you had, but being aware enough to kind of digest the feedback you're getting and being kind of noticing where you're being put and where you're being kind of, guided to by the universe, if nothing else. So I really appreciate, you bringing up those 2 points. And it makes me wonder, a lot of times in organizations, people have one of two mindsets, which is, either I'm just going to keep my head down, I'm going to do my work, and people are going to tell me, you're doing a good job, let's move up, like you're promoted, here's the next step. Or they have a mindset of, I may be doing a good job, that's a given, I have to, that's the prerogative of being here. But I also need to be able to advocate for myself, and I need to be able to go out there and tell people, hey, this is the stuff that I've been doing. These are the things that I, want to accomplish in the future. Can you help me kind of understand how I can get there? And in my experience, it's people who fall in one bucket often need the advice of the other, and people who fall in the other, vice versa. Like, I think we're not cognizant of times of, the times where we do need to let others point it out, and we're not cognizant of the times of when we do need to step up and say something. You have seemed to done both in your career. So how did you know when was the time to do one versus another?
Just so I make sure I understand, one versus the other being,
when it's time to advocate for yourself and when it's time to listen to where, others are pointing you to.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you referred to business as sort of a spiritual journey. I think it's, and I'm ad-libbing this. This is something that my boss always says, but, business is one of the best, and entrepreneurship is one of the best vehicles of self-discovery and of meeting really inspiring, phenomenal people that teach you things about yourself. So I'd say that is sort of my approach as well. I have met the most amazing people, human beings, through this journey, and I've sort of, as you advance through your career, you realize how important it is to really align with the values of the people that you spend so many hours per day with, and that is certainly the case where I am now at Atlas Up. But it is certainly. It's a give and take. It's sometimes, you're leading with the skills that you believe that you have. And sometimes it's also, leaning back and letting someone tell you what they think you would be most, what would be your strongest contribution for this role.
No, very interesting. And, I love how you pointed out at the beginning that, it's like business and more than business, kind of like your career is your spiritual journey. I love that thread just because, oftentimes I tell people I'd be a terrible entrepreneur in paper. I didn't, the finance and the tech don't come naturally, but I will never give up on entrepreneurship just because of that very reason, that I think that it's
Mhm.
a extension of my personal journey of discovering who I am through the people that I work with or through the projects that I work with. I think it has the opportunity to bring out things in me and give me experiences that help me understand who I am. So that's why I always joke. I may not be the best entrepreneur from the get go, but I will try, because like it is something that I really believe aligns with my personal growth more than professional growth, if I may be bold enough to say. And you do this both at work, but you also do this through your advocacy, through other work that you do. I think you have been an advocate for military families. I think you've been a huge support system for others in the area, and I think recently you were even appointed a member of the Defense Council of the Truman National Security Project, which is absolutely fascinating. So tell us a little bit about how that element of life also kind of integrates in your work and your well-being and the family part of what you do.
Absolutely. So tying together our previous kind of thoughts around, being intentional and spiritual and sort of thoughtful about where we spend our time during the day. One tip that I have for anyone that is beginning their career from undergrad or maybe making a pivot is to keep a career journal. I have an article I wrote about this on my LinkedIn page. If you look up just my full name, Hannah Greene Spata. But it is this notebook. It's just a simple navy blue notebook that I treated almost like a scrapbook in the early days of my career. I put in, the train ticket and the interview badge and once I had a role, I put in my feedback forms from each, biannual review that I had from a supervisor. So having that reflective sort of approach to your career, because you are learning so much, especially at the beginning, day to day, has been really important to me. And that's something that has led me to discover what my true kind of passions are from an advocacy standpoint. So um, as I mentioned, am a military spouse. I am a Navy wife, and we're a military family, and we have very different challenges than the average civilian couple when it comes to deployments. I remember being in a high rise in Manhattan and trying to get cell phone reception to speak to my husband, who is in the Persian Gulf on a deployment, and catching him at the off times that I could. And it's a challenging life, but it's very fulfilling. And I'm very proud to be part of our national security in that sense. But I do, you know, the advocacy work that's sort of come into my life with this is military spouse career empowerment. So a lot of folks tend to sort of, you follow your service member around the country or around the world in a lot of cases, and you have to change duty stations every couple years, sometimes every couple months. And it's hard to maintain a career. Of course, easier these days with remote learning and remote professional opportunities, but it can be difficult, especially for folks that have licensure that's tied to a state, such as a bar association for an attorney, or an accountant, or a nurse, or a teacher. So we're working all these different angles to make this easier and more possible for a military spouse and a military family to have, a very fulfilling professional journey that is not, only the only part of the narrative is the service member. So that is one kind of avenue I've really kind of taken to my personal advocacy for. And it's been just very humbling to pull all these different threads from my undergrad experience, my study of foreign policy, and my understanding of our national security, and to bring that to a platform where you really can influence legislation and you really can have an impact. So it's really been this circuitous sort of route that, my academic interests in everything from the South China Sea to political science has, following some stints in investment banking and at Sweet Green in tech and food tech, it's brought me back around to this work that I am so passionate about, which is, technology, national security, foreign policy, things like that.
Absolutely brilliant. We have this beautiful shot of you at, at the Capitol, looking great with the great, view and everything. And I guess, as we start to wind down, and I guess the question is, as you said, your journey has taken you from, Penn. At Penn itself, you went all around the world in your education, and then that was reflected in real life, and the work that you do and the advocacy you do, where you have literally traveled all around the world for the work that you do as well. And I think that is a very inspirational, not just career but life journey that I think a lot of people can learn from. And you are someone that today gives, I'm sure, brilliant advice through your career coaching, through the people that you speak to about this. So I'd love to hear, if you were to synthesize, give us a little spoiler in a sense. What do you think is the most important element for people charting their careers to think about? Like, there's so many things at times, from family to funds to well-being, that it can get a little muddled and can get a little bit out of focus. So what's the guidepost in a sense, for lack of better words?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The guidepost. I'd say just remember that the people that you're working with are people, and it's always a relationships game, no matter what industry, no matter, whether it's for profit, public sector. So, I'll speak to just sort of my current full-time role. I actually met my boss at a conference that I just, speaking of sort of curiosity and following that gut instinct, I just had a feeling that I should go to this conference put on by Inc. 5000, the Birthing of Giants program. And I went as a mentee, as a military spouse, having my business incubated and developed by these giants, these folks that have achieved great levels of business success. So I went and I met my now boss, Jerry Simpson, who I've worked for just over 2 years. And, it's something that I spoke to this earlier, but pitching a role really that doesn't exist at a company is something that I've just learned to do sort of by accident recently. And I found this chief of staff role to be really fulfilling because it speaks to all the generalist, operational skill sets that I have. So I was able to, form this relationship, pitch the role, and now have this really fulfilling career in, a product that is generative AI for businesses. And it is essentially just as you have ChatGPT for all of your personal purposes, we have, the ability to connect your business data with OpenAI and that LLM to then give you answers that are saving time and saving a lot of waste that you might be seeing in your business. So all of that to say, relationships and people first, definitely keep that at the forefront. All the people you meet at Penn, keep in touch, be a good person, be a good advocate for their work. But then in my personal kind of coaching practice, I'd say one thing that I often share with people is that odds are you're not going to land the role that you want by doing a cold resume submission on LinkedIn. The odds are that you are going to land that role sort of unconventionally, as I just spoke to, whether it's at a conference when you strike up a conversation with someone and you realize you would work well together, or if it's something that I work on quite frequently with folks, especially multi-hyphenates, as we call ourselves, people that have, a lot of different experiences in different places. You can explain those transferable skills in a pitch deck format. So just as you would pitch yourself or just as a company would pitch, itself to a possible investor, you can use storytelling through slides to pitch yourself as an individual or as an employee. So That is my main piece of advice, is to focus on the relationships, the people that make up these wonderful companies. And of course, if you're going the entrepreneurial route, relationships are just as important, if not more important, because that is how you accomplish whatever your company's mission is. So keep people at the forefront always.
Absolutely. And, I think just to put it up there, I think this is your website, if I'm not mistaken, where people can find out more about your coaching and, the work that you do at that end. Just because I think, it's so valuable to have someone to talk through the pivots that people are trying to make. I know a lot of friends are, recently graduated or have been in their roles for a couple of years now and could probably need, some of the thoughts of what they can be doing differently and what they can be, thinking about differently as they make those decisions. So already you've given us, absolutely golden advice, and I hope that more people can take advantage of that and reach out and have the conversations they need to have. But as we wind down, final question. I thought it'd be fun to end, on this photo, which is absolutely beautiful of you. Your graduation from Penn, absolutely. Like, I can't even believe that this photo exists. So, like, love it, absolutely brilliant. But if you knew what you knew now back then, or if you could travel back in time and tell yourself just one thing, what would be the thing you tell yourself, on that graduation day with the world ahead of you, not knowing all that's going to happen?
Oof. I would tell myself that every answer you will ever need is somewhere deep down inside of you. You just have to chip away at the noise, and just trusting that intuition has been the fuel for the best decisions I've ever made, from my my marriage to my professional endeavors. Tune out the noise, listen to the answer that you hopefully have inside.
Amazing. From curiosity to listening to that instinct to our amazing conversation, from practical tips at the career level to balancing that with advocacy, with well-being. I think this has been a very fulfilling episode. I think you've given us a lot of hard hitters that we have to go back and think about and digest and reflect on. But I really do appreciate you being on the show, and I hope you had just as much fun as we did listening to you, being here and sharing your experiences with us. So thank you so much. And as I said, like, you are someone who I think can inspire so many just by that story. And I think our audience definitely appreciates this very spiritual almost take on life and business, and kind of sewing together the threads of what it really means to live a life well lived.
Well, Harsha, this has been so much fun. You are such a dynamic, impressive, thoughtful, kind person. And I'm so glad that you have this platform at the university to tell stories like this. And it's been a pleasure. And if I can be of help or support to anyone that is listening to this, Harsha shared my website. It's www.Hannah, Hannah, Greene, Greene, Spata, Spata.com.
All right. And with that, I think our episode for today comes to a close. But thank you so much for being here with us. And to our audience, as always, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate each and every single one of you. This has been Changing Reality. See you again next week. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS